Did Trump deceive everyone, and will he cause the biggest crisis in the world when it comes to finances, especially regarding crypto? How should we behave? What should we do about it? Is he really trying to cause a long-term crisis? Or is he just trying to drive the price down as much as possible and then create a single financial system based on cryptocurrencies? Has Donald Trump, with his decisions, not just undermined his electoral promises? My dears, the most important information from what has been happening in America recently: what about tariffs? What about cryptocurrencies? What about traditional markets? How will we feel? The changes. Will we be poorer? Or will those who have money make a fortune? A very important episode, my friends, so sit down, watch, let's not prolong it, and let's get started. So, my dear friends, the trade war. To start this episode, we should explain what a trade war is, after which we recently, for the first time in many, many years, we could hear it loudly. And actually, according to the theory, listen up, a trade war is a disruption or breakdown of neutral trade relations between two unified economies, with the goal of one side, in this episode the United States, gaining economic or political advantage, while the other side is forced to make political or economic concessions. And such a war, listen, is usually characterized by certain attributes, or rather their implementation. Tariffs, increase in import fees for goods. Quantitative restrictions, meaning limits on the quantity of imported goods. Subsidies for family businesses to increase their competitiveness. Trade sanctions, which are bans on the import or export of certain products or goods. And of course, technical regulations, meaning certain standards and agreements that you could say make it harder to access the market. And listen, why is that? The topic of the trade war has been brought up, which is currently constantly surprising. It's super important for both the cryptocurrency market and traditional markets, and why it might be triggered, you'll definitely find out in this episode later on. So, my dear friends, point one, the timeline. And to better understand what's going on here, listen, it's worth taking a closer look at the events. That's why for this episode, you'll have a chronological description of the events prepared for you. On February 1st, my dear friends, in a statement from the White House, it was reported that Donald Trump will introduce an additional 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, as well as a 10% tariff for China. So, does he have some kind of plan here, maybe, to start production on his own? Or maybe he just wants America to actually bring back its profits and return to that economic power. And he said exactly that it's aimed at holding those countries accountable for stopping illegal immigration and halting the influx of drugs into the United States. So it's kind of like a punishment. And here, Mexico and Canada promised to respond with their own tariffs, while China announced that they would take necessary countermeasures. And as we know, in the mouths of the Chinese, it sounds quite interesting and uncertain. On February 3rd, listen, the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, announced that she and Trump reached an agreement to lift tariffs on 30 days. Mexico agreed to send 10,000 members of the National Guard abroad, probably to bring illegal immigrants from the United States back to Mexico. And things are really going to get quite interesting here shortly, when it comes to cryptocurrencies or traditional markets. And Mexico definitely got scared by that threat and decided to negotiate before giving any response. The same was suddenly decided by the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trump. Later that same day, listen, he said that at the last minute he had, of course, a phone conversation with Trump. Canada agreed to strengthen its border in exchange for a 30-day delay on the tariffs. And at the very end, of course, we have China and their situation. If you remember, last weekend and Monday night caused a very strong sell-off in the market, which was basically a risk-off move. And why did this happen at all? Meaning, why did this sell-off occur, which we also saw very clearly in the crypto markets, especially with Bitcoin? At the moment when the news broke that the US was imposing those tariffs on China, the traditional markets in China, listen, were already closed, so they couldn't react to that information. So Trump knew exactly what he was doing. You know, how it drops in China. Asset pricing? Well, you can make money on that because it will be short-term. Trump knows what to do, Trump knows what to say, and he knows how to do it. The markets will behave over time, so this is just regular business. So the specter of a trade war has caused unease in the market, but not in the way that everyone would expect. Well, in China, listen, it wasn't the companies related to the products that were hit with tariffs, but cryptocurrencies. What's going on here? Especially interesting because China is known for banning these cryptocurrencies, so there's something much, much deeper going on here. And investors got scared and decided to simply sell off their risky assets. It's well known that these could be cryptocurrencies, which are the most volatile, and as a consequence, we saw very strong drops in crypto, and in companies strictly related to the cryptocurrency sector. And unlike Mexico or Canada, the US did not reach an agreement with China. Additionally, there is no information whatsoever that any talks were initiated by Trump to postpone this deadline, and the consequence of that was the response. On February 4th, China's Ministry of Finance announced that it would impose a 15% tariff on American coal and a 10% tariff on oil, agricultural equipment, and some cars. So they chose elements that are very, very strongly, you could say, trade-related. But, my dear friends, that's not all, because there's a catch here. These tariffs are set to take effect on February 10th, so Beijing, you could say, decided to play the opposite card against Trump. And here, actually, listen, the point is that they had to respond because they are a superpower, and in order to save face, they simply could not remain indifferent to the decision to impose tariffs. However, in the long run, they really realize that they can't go to war with the United States because they have too much to lose. That's why they decided to leave a window for negotiations. And whether they will reach an agreement, we will really find out. February 10th. However, looking at Trump's current policy and narrative, it's clear that he's not really taking any prisoners. And what does that mean? The chances of them reaching an agreement before the tariffs are implemented are slim. Even to be, objective and take into account the voices from Polymarket, which according to People gives only a 24% chance that Trump will reach an agreement with China regarding tariffs before May. And now let's move on to our beloved socialists, the European Union. So it's worth considering a certain scenario that they won't reach an agreement, and that Trump is talking about imposing tariffs not only on these three countries, but also on the European Union. And it appears here, the topic of tariffs imposed by Trump in 2018 seems to be something that many people have simply forgotten. Back then, his first administration had already imposed punitive tariffs on products from EU countries, namely 25% on steel, 10% on aluminum, and on products made from all those metals. It's known that increasing these tariffs will really hit the whole world, mainly consumers. That is us, the people who trade or the people who buy certain products. In January 2020, the tariffs were suspended by President Joe Biden's team, but this suspension will automatically expire at the end of March 2025, which is in 2 months. And then, the retaliatory tariffs that the European Union imposed will also come into effect, with a hint of humor, so we'll see who will be laughing now. Well, definitely not us. I'm talking about the tariffs, you see, because the European Commission decided in 2018 to raise tariffs on the most American goods like whiskey, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, and blue jeans. That's why I wear sweatpants. As we know well, Trump doesn't really like the European Union, and you could give him a high five for that. And during the campaign, he said such words: "They don't take our cars, they don't take our food, they hardly take anything from us, while we take everything from them. Millions of cars, huge amounts of food and agricultural products." So something is definitely brewing around the corner. And here, in an abstract yet really real scenario, Trump would decide to impose a general tariff of 10% on all goods from the European Union, which could slow down the economic growth of the entire bloc by 0.5–0.9%, which is a very significant result. I mean, that's actually a very poor result. For comparison, it is predicted that GDP growth in the European Union will be, in 2025, just 1.5%, rising to 1.8% the following year. As a result, my dear friends, the chance of a recession in the bloc of European countries would sharply increase, which is quite, a weak sign for us. Of course, for millionaires and billionaires who have money set aside for such a crisis, this is the best time to make money, because of the opportunities to buy properties, businesses, or various other things at a discount. But just like I told you once, the European Union and its twists and turns, that's the moon. Mexico and Canada, let's go back for a moment to the topic of all of America, because potential economic conflicts there have echoed. The United States, Canada, and Mexico form one of the most interconnected economic zones in the world. One of the industries that will feel these changes the most will be the automotive industry, namely Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. They largely base their production on facilities located in Canada and Mexico. About 40% of Stellantis cars sold in the USA come from these countries. In the case of General Motors and Ford, the percentages are 30% and 25% respectively. And these companies will face the necessity of either paying 25% of the costs or passing those costs on to consumers. I think the answer is obvious. The costs will be passed on to us. And according to forecasts, the prices of imported cars could rise by as much as $10,000, which is a huge amount. Even vehicles assembled in the United States that contain Canadian and Mexican components could increase in price by $1,250, which is really a significant amount. As a result, car sales could drop by 7.5% in the coming year. A similar threat also applies to the food industry. The United States imports agricultural products worth $45 billion from Mexico and $40 billion from Canada each year. Among them are, for example, such goods include beef, pork, grains, tomatoes, and strawberries. So, my mother-in-law has to switch to a different diet. The introduction of the CEU will raise food prices, and retaliatory actions by Canada and Mexico will include agricultural products, especially alcohol and consumer goods from the United States. They could further increase costs. My dears, can you imagine this episode? For example, it might seem uninteresting, but what's happening there and what the consequences could be can be tragic, tragically affecting consumers and how much money we will suddenly have to spend without an increase in wages. And unfortunately, the problems will not spare the energy market either. Canada accounts for 60% of refined oil supplies to the United States, even though the White House has imposed, listen, only a 10% tariff on energy imports to avoid sharp increases in fuel prices. So, even such a rate will translate into higher costs for consumers. It won't be cheaper for us either. The difficulties, listen, will also affect the construction sector. 1/3 of America's softwood comes from Canada, so the introduction of the CEU will simply lead to an increase in housing prices. You think so in Poland, right? In Europe, right? Additionally, the import of cement from Mexico will become more expensive. Crucial for the infrastructure of the United States in the real estate market, which is already struggling with the issue of housing availability, this could be a critical moment. And at the moment when the states have such a problem and are also losing money because of it, they will impose increasingly higher tariffs, increasingly higher taxes on countries in the European Union, which will directly translate for us or will directly lead to a crisis between 1925 and 1926. As a result, listen, Trump, it seems that he is starting to play Russian roulette. On one hand, you can clearly say that he is trying to present himself as a new leader who will change everything here, takes no prisoners, and wants to have, as always, Trump to have the best negotiating position. On the other hand, listen, if neither the USA nor the allied countries I've mentioned so far back down, and this is where the global trade war will begin, a potential recession, it would just be one of many problems in the world. And this is not about that. Again, it's not that I'm scaring you, but I'm informing you to think about how to use this or how to conduct your actions so that you don't lose out on it. So listen, there are two options. Or Trump will come out of this conflict as a genius, a strategist, a man who isn't afraid to do anything, just a man with guts, and as a result, he will have a winning position in any negotiations. Or, as a man who caused one of the greatest crises in the world, because in this situation there will be no other way out. And here, my dear, now at the end, speculation and a summary of how this could directly impact the market, our lives, cryptocurrencies, investments, real estate, cars, etc. And Donald Trump, listen, has repeatedly expressed a desire to weaken the American currency, that is, the dollar. However, analyses indicate that achieving this goal may be difficult due to the strong economic fundamentals of the United States and the Federal Reserve's policy. Powell says, listen, no to interest rate cuts, and the introduction of tariffs will also cause the dollar to strengthen, not weaken. So let's imagine a scenario where the administration led by Donald Trump decides to massively print more dollars. He himself has often, you could say, said that he has nothing against. Printing more money would lead to an infinite increase in public debt and an increase in the amount of money in circulation. And such a decision would have huge consequences for the entire monetary system and would definitely shake the whole world. This would be associated with a sudden, immediate rise in inflation, devaluation, total collapse of the dollar, and destabilization of global markets. Such a policy, you could say, could change the way the world perceives traditional money and open a new path to digital forms of capital protection. The question is, isn't it? That's what Trump is about. As a result, the only way out is cryptocurrencies. And that's the way they can be, which unofficially, really Trump has been continuously buying under the cover of Wi-Fi. Of course, these amounts are currently small, considering what, for example, BlackRock or other big players, but not without reason. Trump was so vocal about crypto, and now he is silent. Let's add to that the release of Trump memecoin and, of course, Melania and Eric Trump, who tweeted that it's a good time to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum, giving us quite a decent story for speculation. Let's not forget about the unofficial meeting of the creators of the biggest projects in the sector. Just crypto with the Trump family. I think they didn't meet for morning coffee, but rather to talk about specific serious things. My friends, if the situation stabilizes, everything will be okay. Of course, it won't have a direct big impact on the markets. I don't think we'll feel it too much. However, at the moment when Trump starts going crazy and actually begins to impose those tariffs, wanting to disrupt the entire monetary policy, my friends, it's better to gather cash to have it for investments in case of a potential crisis. When it comes, those who have money will simply profit, because they will be buying things at a bargain. Things that in 3, 4, or 5 years will bounce back, and they will make hundreds of % on it, because that's how this world works. And that's how the biggest millionaires and billionaires in the world are making their money. An additional situation regarding crypto is that if Trump really wants to dive into these cryptocurrency assets, he will want to buy them as cheaply as possible. So in my opinion, even if we were to have a breakthrough in crypto and actually have the real adoption in the world and the change of the monetary system around the world, I can't imagine it happening without this preceding it. Dump. A dump like that, where everyone gives up and says crypto is a scam. Then suddenly, crypto will become the only possible means of payment in the world, the only legal one, the largest financial system in the world. This is a kind of speculation, so my friends, it doesn't have to happen. However, it's better to be ready for the most irrational moves, as you've already learned from the moves of the last ones. Cryptocurrencies. And now, my friends, thank you very much for watching this episode. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next episodes, and give us a stay tuned about cryptocurrencies. I'm really curious what you think about this. What's your take on it? In the meantime, I sincerely thank you and wish you a lovely weekend. We'll see each other on the live stream, and we'll see each other on Monday for the market update. So, thank you very much, take care, and see you later.